So let's talk about what we know of the Plague Legion of Mortarion so far, with an overview of all the hints and teasers that we've had of the Death Guard Codex and their model releases, and to look over some interesting though potentially unreliable rules leaks. If they're right, we might be getting some Toughness 6 Plague Marines, though having a few units cut from the roster. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Death Guard, and in this one I thought we'd do a general overview of all the things that we know about the Codex at the moment, all the hints and teasers that Games Workshop dropped from their livestream, and then talk through one rumour collation that seems to have been posted online and gained a fair bit of attention, kind of feeling like it's following on from the World Eaters ones that we had recently. Interesting that so far we've heard things for Death Guard and World Eaters but not for Thousand Sons yet. It will be interesting to see if anything surfaces. Death Guard maybe haven't had the smoothest ride through 10th edition rules so far. They started the edition as perhaps one of the single weakest armies in the entire game. Games Workshop basically needing to add in a big extra effect to their contagions and also drop a whole bunch of points cost to try and make them work. And since then they've generally been fairly well balanced, most of their units being at least somewhat playable. Mortarion is strong right now, Typhus and the Death Shroud, Blight Haulers, Bloat Drones and Predator tanks can put out some good firepower. Plague Marine combos and Rhinos with the Biologist Putrefier are really nice, and plenty more of the book is fairly usable. Maybe the Blight Lord Terminators and some of the support characters feel like they're perhaps a bit behind some of the rest, and could be one thing that Games Workshop could look at in an update. At the moment for their tournament stats they seem like a solidly good mid-tier faction, win rates of sort of around 48-49%. They have been winning tournaments and recently as well, another 12th most played army out of the 27 in 40k currently. Model-wise, they're not really doing too badly compared with the other Deity Legions. They're the best supported with multiple flavours of infantry, plenty of demon engines, and perhaps a surprisingly wide array of support characters. They did well out of being the 8th edition antagonist faction with the big launch of the Primaris. And I feel like rules-wise, maybe the main criticism of them in 10th edition is that they're a bit weirdly non-elite. Plague Marines are at least fairly cheap to put on the board, and the same goes for the Terminator variants as well. And maybe having some sense they're not really quite so durable and tanky as you might expect of Mortarion Sons. That certainly feels true of the standard Plague Marine stat line at least. Quite a lot of things kill Toughness 5 with 2 wounds pretty efficiently. Things are about to change fairly soon in the future though, as their codex have been known to be coming for quite a long time at the moment, and now it's on Games Workshop's roadmap for now pretty much, along with the Thousand Sons, World Eaters and Space Wolves. I don't think it's necessarily 100% guaranteed that the codexes are going to drop in this order. Might be a bit weird if Thousand Sons come before the other two, though I guess it's not impossible. And Games Workshop do move things around when it suits them as well. For example, we had the Night Codex listed in their roadmap for early in 2025, then got pushed back to far later. I'd guess that the Deity Legions will probably come out before the Space Wolves, just because they've been teased on the timetable first, but I guess we'll wait and see. In any case, I'd certainly expect some of them to be coming along in the not too distant future. I saw at least one person claiming that they'd have pre-orders coming out on the 26th of April, and if that was right then they'd have to announce them this coming Sunday. I guess we'll see whether that turns out to be the case. Games Workshop unveiled the Codex cover art. It looks like it's Typhus on the cover there, standing above a whole load of slain Ultramarines and a bunch of great demonic plague flies swirling all around, and looks like the Nurgle icon is emblazoned on that. Games Workshop actually did give us a fair few details as to the Codex in their reveal stream. They did skim over it quite quickly, given that they were basically announcing 5 different Warhammer 40k codexes at once, but I thought that the details they did share were interesting, and we sort of know the pattern of the Deity codexes judging by the Emperor's Children now. In Codex Death Guard, there'll be 6 detachments, and that means that alongside the Flyblown host from the Grotmus detachments, there'll be a very holy 7 in total. It seems that we know the name for one of them and the identity of a couple more. They generally name their battle forces after one of the detachments, so one of them should be the Poxwrought Vector, and then the other more mainstream one that they talked about was the Poxwalker detachment, so there will be one themed around the Plague Zombies, maybe going for a bit of the lore of the Harbingers sort of plague company there perhaps. They said that one basically gives you an unending horde of Poxwalkers, which maybe makes me wonder if there'd be one of those stratagems to sort of recycle a units for 2 command points, which definitely could be nice enough, though given that they're only locked to once per game by the balanced data slate at the moment, if that's the way that they recycle then it would be a very much ending horde I guess. The other detachment that they confirmed was the demons being added in. They had said that a bunch of Nurgle demons would be in the Codex, and going by the Emperor's Children ones, it'll most likely be the Plague Bearers, Plague Drones, Beasts of Nurgle, Great Unclean One, and Rotigus. And it seems like a fairly safe bet that they'd get Nurglings as well on top of that. I think that fits quite well with the datasheets that got updated in the Demon Codex. It looked like they'd just done datasheet updates for the ones that were actually starring in the various Deity Legion books, and the rest had got minimal changes, if anything. If this one follows the pattern for the Emperor's Children though, they'll quite likely be only playable in one detachment, able to be fielded up to half the army, and going by just about all the other allied detachments out there, they generally tend to get bonuses when you have, say, mortals and demons standing side by side. There definitely could be different flavours depending on whether those bonuses are, say, damage or defence or something else. The demons being treated that way would likely mean that other Death Guard lists might soon lose access to things like, say, allied Nurglings, which could annoy some people with their collections, particularly as they've been a pretty common choice in 10th. One will likely be a reinterpretation of the current Plague Company in some way, though that still leaves a lot of question marks. I think it'd be unlikely that they wouldn't do something like a Demon Engine or vehicle-themed one. That's just quite a big part of the Death Guard range, so I don't see why that you'd leave that out. And beyond that, I suppose they could draw on some of the theme and lore of the Plague Companies, perhaps a Psychic-themed Wretched one, or a Terminator-style Ferryman one, or going for something creative like that Flyblown Host. In any case, those were the main official teasers that we got from the Codex, besides a few rules hints for the Lord of Poxes, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And probably just worth mentioning with the Codex that there'll also be the fancy one on offer as well. The big limited edition Mortarian one with the metal tokens, that Chaos Coin thing, and a bunch of data cards and things thrown in. If it goes like the Emperor's Children though, you're probably not going to have the opportunity to buy it, which honestly I can't really see most people jumping to do anyway, given they're charging £155 or $250 for it, which would far outweigh how much enjoyment I'd get from it personally. Before we move on to the realm of uncertainty and some possible leaks, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in the Magnet Baron, a supplier of magnets and components for 40k kits and more, based in the USA. Magnetising is certainly something I've enjoyed quite a bit in most of my armies. Made my Leman Rosses and Imperial Knights have been some of the ones that have been most successful with that. Just kits that can be fielded in all sorts of different ways. It's quite fun to be able to change things up from game to game or when Games Workshop changes the rules. The Magnet Baron's got a few purpose-built kits with that sort of thing in mind. One of their most popular ones being this Questoris Knight kit with a whole bunch of 3D printed subbing components that mean that you don't have to drill anything, and a nice easy step-by-step guide on their site. They've got similar offerings for a whole bunch of different Warhammer 40k kits, loads of general magnet supplies. And another one of their more popular offerings are these flight stand bundles as well. Another common use for magnets to get around Games Workshop's flying bases for any grav tanks or jump infantry that you might have. I'll cycle back to a few more of their things at the end of the video, so check back there if you'd like to see a bit more, but otherwise there'll be links down in the video description, and of course a massive thank you to them for sponsoring this one. Let's move on from Games Workshop's teasers to talk about this possible leak then, and then talk about the rules teasers for the Lord of Poxes, their big discount Battleforce box set, and their Combat Patrol. These leaks have been coming out at a similar sort of time to the World Eaters, and in particular the thing that seems to have got the most attention was someone rounding up a bunch of the things that have been teased and then posting them to Reddit in one great big thread. As with the World Eaters ones, these ones are text leaks, so it could be very, very easy to make up, though as I said in the previous video, it does seem that we've had a fair few of these text leaks turn out to be right on the money. The last two that I talked about on the channel were the Fulgrims and Emperor's Children ones that got heavily written off and they turned out to be real, and then some dodgy looking balanced data-to-date ones that also seemed a bit unlikely, teasing things like a detachment to the Adeptus Custodes, but then again that one turned out to be right. Obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that this one's going to be right. I do feel like a lot of the things that they shared do seem very plausible, to the point where I think it's interesting enough and worth talking about. No point in getting too worked up about anything at this point though, given that it could all be completely made up, and I'm sure it won't be too long before we find out what was true and what wasn't. For the things that the leak roundup claimed, first up they mentioned a few datasheets might be going away. This did seem like it was one of the biggest questions that we didn't know yet about the deity codexes, as in 10th edition each time a codex has come out we've sort of had a big reckoning with things going to legends, often older kits, though I felt like the other deity legions could be a good place where they might do some more of that, in particular armies like Death Guard that have a fair few generic Chaos Space Marine kits, many of which weren't included in say the recent Emperor's Children book say. In any case, this rumour claims that generic Terminator Lords and Sorcerers are going away and won't be a thing in the Death Guard Codex, and nor will the standard Cultist squad. Given how they've treated World Eaters at the end of 9th and Emperor's Children in 10th, that does at least seem kind of plausible. Neither of those armies have any of those three, and as ever, if it did turn out to be true, it would kind of suck for the people who own the models, particularly if you converted them up really nicely to fit in with Death Guard. It feels like the Cultists might have the potential to be the most painful, given that some people could have a lot of those, and to be honest, we did already kind of know that Cultists would probably be losing the autogun variant of them, given that that didn't make the jump into the recent Chaos Space Marine Codex. You can only field them with this squad with close combat weapons now. So even if this does turn out to be completely fake, and they are in the book, I still at the least expect the version with autoguns and special weapons to go away. Either way though, it does just feel a little bit pointless to remove them. The models are there and Games Workshop wants to sell them. And while they might not be very specifically themed to the Death Guard, the same is true of things like Land Raiders and Rhinos. I think it just makes sense to have some representation for the Death Guard's mortal followers, even if they do have their Poxwalker zombies. In any case, if they do go away, I'd guess they'd go to Legends rules, and it wasn't mentioned in the leak thing, but I suppose the Lord on Foot would probably become the Lord of Poxes now, given there wasn't a Death Guard Lord in power armor, and now there's going to be. Otherwise, one of the other most interesting rumoured things was that Death Guard might be getting a toughness increase. They said that Plague Marines will be going to toughness 6 and Terminators to toughness 7. That seems like a pretty reasonable decision to me. It's been one of the most consistent criticisms in 10th edition so far that Death Guard just aren't really durable enough on an individual basis. Statline increases would really help that if they're not going to get a disgustingly resilient rule of some sort. And getting +2 toughness from regular Space Marines I don't think is too overblown really. +1 toughness was maybe a little bit more of a big deal when the toughness chart generally went from like 3 to 8. Now it goes all the way up to 12 and beyond. Toughness 5 just isn't quite what it was. If that does wind up being true, then the toughness 6 Plague Marine feels like the bigger change compared with the Terminators. Toughness 6 is a better breakpoint against things like Strength 3, Strength 5, Strength 6 and Strength 10, which are all common enough. Raising the Terminators up to toughness 7, I guess would only really matter big for Strength 6 and Strength 7, and a little bit for Strength 12, which I'd say aren't really quite so common, though I guess even las cannons wounding them on a 3+ will be kind of fun. That seems pretty reasonable to me to slant the Death Guard towards being a bit more tanky as opposed to what they are now. Otherwise, they rumoured a bunch of Terminator changes, as well as Toughness 7, both of them getting some interesting extra rules, stating that Blight Lords would have their main weapons go to damage 2 apiece, so maybe being treated as sort of mastercrafted plague weapons or something, and their buffer be swapped to better strength and AP when shooting in contagion range. That'd be a lot more impactful than the rerolls that they get currently. The Blight Lord Terminators certainly need something. They've just been so far behind the Death Shroud for so long in 10th edition that it's been a bit ridiculous. Perhaps if anything, the slightly more terrifying thing that they said was that Death Guard could get a 6-inch deep strike and still charge. Out of anything that the leak says, that one maybe sounds like the single most unlikely, almost unexpected reveal if true. It's not exactly unheard of. The demons have a stratagem where they can do it with anything in their army in Demon Incursion, including things like greater demons, but seems like it will be a massively super powerful thing to put on Death Shroud, as it basically guarantees them getting into melee, where that's maybe one of their bigger weaknesses at the moment with their slow move and maybe unreliable charges out of Deep Strike. If that did wind up being right though, it still doesn't necessarily mean that that would be a buff for Death Shroud or anything like that, given that if they gave them a crazy rule like that, they would absolutely bump up the points cost, and by really quite a lot, and probably by so much it'd be that Death Shroud just aren't really the incredibly scary damage and defense unit that they are now, but instead just aren't really stand out for those costs and pay a big premium for just being able to jump into melee at a moment's notice. I just wouldn't be tempted to hear that and assume that they're going to stay at the same stat line and points cost, as that would just be ridiculous. That's assuming that that's not an exaggeration, lacking context, or just made up though, which of course we don't know right now. Finally, they had a bunch of other smaller things, stating Plague Marines get a new datasheet ability, which to be honest sounds like a very safe bet to me. Their current one is just very bad with a boost to leadership, and given that they're the battle line unit, I'd strongly suspect that they'll have something that interacts with objectives in some way, maybe even getting sticky objectives if they do rewrite the Plague Company rule. Otherwise, they said that Mortarion is more dangerous and will lose his Ignores Modifiers aura. I don't know whether that's the chicken or the egg versus the Fulgrim article. It could be someone making it up based on that, or it could be confirmation that that omission was deliberate. Either way, it wouldn't surprise me if Mortarion got stronger. I suspect that Games Workshop probably want him to be somewhat on the same sort of level playing field as Angron and Magnus in his own way, so it feels a bit wrong for him to have like 100 points less value than them. Otherwise, they said that all attachments will be good, which is super subjective and just plain unlikely in a 6 detachment codex. Even if they're all interesting, I'm sure there'll be stronger and weaker ones, and the Icon Bearer may get some sort of similar ability to the current Hellbrute rule. That's the one that can put contagions on people at longer range. As mentioned, no confirmation on this one yet, though it'll be interesting seeing Games Workshop's first previews if they broadly fit with this or not. I feel like for the most part I like the idea of the changes. Seems like it could pair with making Death Guard both a bit more elite and durable, which seems like that'd be what people would like to see from them. Maybe a bit more powerful on an individual model basis as opposed to just taking lots of them. I think I like most of the proposed changes, particularly the ones to the Blight Lords and the Plague Marine toughness. I'm not sure if Death Guard deep striking at 6 inches in reserve seems like a great idea though. But Mortarion improving and a new Plague Marine special rule both would be good. Losing units obviously wouldn't be ideal, though if it does just wind up being those 3, it could probably be worse. Maybe the roster not being quite so cut down as the Emperor's Children have had it at least. They had a lot of obvious Chaos Space Marine picks that they couldn't take. Let me know your thoughts on these supposed leaks though. Do you think that these look likely or not? And if they turned out to be true, which of the changes would you like or dislike? Back onto more confirmed things though, and let's talk miniature releases and the rules teasers for the Lord of Poxes. This guy got leaked in a model sprue sent out to someone who then assembled it and showcased the model to the world. I feel like an on-foot power armoured Lord isn't too bad a choice if they had decided that they were going to give the Death Guard a single character release. As mentioned, they were using the generic Chaos Lord model before, so nice to have something a bit more themed as an option, even if they do have rather a lot of power armoured support characters with the featured Virion ones. We'd had a couple of very light teasers when his model was revealed, though in the announcement stream Games Workshop gave us a fair few more direct clues to how he works in game. Apparently the weapon slung on his back is called a Great Plague Blade, and the way they described that was one of the most powerful combat weapons in Warhammer 40k according to their hype stream, which honestly to me just sounds kind of plain unlikely really. I guess maybe I'd take away from that he probably will hit fairly hard in close combat with that massive plague weapon. I'm sure very high strength, maybe they might be generous and give him damage 3 or something, so hopefully he'll be fairly dangerous. Otherwise he's got a plasma pistol for a bit of shooting, and then the thing mounted on his back is called a miasmic turbine, which apparently does have an attack profile all of its own. Most likely something to cut through some infantry. The miasmic turbine that he has on his back basically creates a great big plague smog that can cover the plague marine unit that he can join. And in the stream it sounded like they basically said that this was a can't shoot him at a certain distance sort of special rule. Their exact wording was doesn't let enemies past a certain range see the unit at all. Based on the other rules in 10th edition, it sounds like his unit just won't be able to be shot greater than 18 inches away. And I guess it's possible that you could have either stealth or cover provided by it as well. Seems likely he'll get one rule to represent that, and then one for his command abilities, which could be anything from sort of standard captain style free stratagems to some kind of damage buff. Hopefully overall he'll be worth taking. At the moment it does seem to be the Biologist Putrefier, Plague Marines and Rhinos that's the tried and tested way of dealing massive melee damage with them. For model hopes for the Death Guard, I think it was kind of unlikely that we'd get anything more than a single character release. It maybe seems a bit unlikely that's going to be the case until the other deity legions catch up with them a bit in terms of the amount of kits that they have. They did get quite a lot in 8th edition. It might not be the best fails in the world though if they just keep on releasing more and more minor characters, given that that seems to be an already pretty oversaturated part of their roster right now. I feel like Death Guard have definitely had a fair few suggestions over the years. Maybe some obvious gaps could be a possessed equivalent for them, given that they used to be able to field those from the sort of more core Codex Chaos Marine kind of models, and then they lost them. Would be cool to see some, say, Nurgle versions of 8-bound or Flawless Blades. I think most of the Tracer Legions would like a unique Hellbrute model of their own. Games Workshop don't seem to be particularly keen on unique vehicle kits these days though. It's been very infantry heavy in 10th. It'd be cool to see the original Lord of Contagion come back in some form as well. The Lord Felthius model just isn't quite as good as the Dark Imperium one in my opinion. And then otherwise they could do some things like Plague Marine equivalents, maybe Havocs, or expand the main box set up to 10 perhaps, which wouldn't be quite as holy with Nurgle's number of 7, but a bit more practical and probably better value given that you get a bit shortchanged with the one currently. Seems that any of these might be left to editions in the future though. Instead, what they did get is their Battleforce box set, and they will get a new and updated Combat Patrol set too. As briefly mentioned earlier, their Battleforce is called the Poxwrought Vector. This one's commanded by the Lord of Poxes himself. Then there's 5 Black Lord Terminators, 7 Plague Marines, then a Plague Burst Crawler, Bloat Drone, and Blight Hauler. Kind of makes me wonder whether or not the Poxwrought Vector will turn out to be the Demon Engine detachment, given that there's 3 of them here. Currently those kits added together cost £206 or $333, so around about typical sort of discount levels for Games Workshop as they normally have, around about 30% or so. I'd guess the box set might be kind of similar to the Christmas Battleforce box sets of $230, though it could potentially be a little bit cheaper. With the points as they stand at the moment, it'd be around about 700 points or so in the box, which isn't terrible. A good chunk of an army at least. And I guess if some of those rumoured changes do come to pass, then the points cost might well go up a bit if the Plague Marines and the Black Lords get some improvements, for example. Overall response to that one was pretty good. When I asked you guys to rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, you gave it a 3.7 stars. It does seem like quite a nice intro to Death Guard box set to me, and potentially even one that you could get twice if you really wanted to. It's just quite nice to have 2 core infantry kits and then one of each of the supporting demon engines. It seems to be nice enough, if not crazily stand out, on the points in the box and the discount sort of thing. Compared with ones that you've rated in the past that would put it towards the upper end of Battleforce reactions, it got voted a bit higher than the Thousand Suns and the World Eaters ones dropping at the same time, and far better than the Grey Knights, so it looks like this could be one of the box sets that's in more demand than the others when they do come out alongside the Codexes. Fingers crossed Games Workshop makes at least a fair few of them. Finally, the last model release for the Death Guard, barring any surprises, is the Combat Patrol. And while most of the ones in 10th edition do generally seem to have been downgrades, It feels like the Death Guard one has got more scope than most to be improved. It was just a bit of an odd choice of the box sets to include not one but 3 Poxwalker sets in it, so you get 30 zombies, completely outnumbering the Space Marines, which isn't exactly what you want as a new player. I guess given Typhus was there, maybe they were going for a sort of Harbingers, Poxwalker, zombie horde type theme, but ultimately not one that many people really wanted to buy. It does feel like almost whatever they choose out of the Death Guard range, it is probably going to be an improvement on this one in a lot of players' eyes. When looking over Death Guard rumour discussion, it looks like there's been the rumour of this one floating around, I believe originally from Chapter Master Valrak, so credit for providing some early information there if so. And if this one does turn out to be right, it'll perhaps feel like the single best updated combat patrol out of 10th edition. I feel like the Custodes one kind of was good and stayed good, whereas this one went from one of the worst to perhaps one of the better ones, apparently with a Lord of Virulence, a Tallyman, 3 Death Shroud Terminators, 7 Plague Marines and a Rhino. That feels like a fairly good balance to me, and seems like it'd pair really well with the Battleforce box set. If that is the case, you could easily get this and the Battleforce box set and basically have most of the Death Guard range right there. And quite nice to have the Rhinos with the Plague Marines and a leader for them, so you can fill them all as one unit if you'd like. Generally Rhinos have been the way to get Plague Marines into combat recently. Hopefully it won't be too long before we find out one way or the other though. In any case though, let me know your thoughts as to the Codex teasers so far and the potential rules leaks. I look forward to hearing all your takes down in the comments as always. What are your hopes and fears for the Sons of Mortarion, and do you reckon that those leaks are going to turn out to be accurate or not? Finally, I'll just cycle back quickly to the Magnet Baron who sponsored the video. As mentioned, supplies of magnets and components for 40k kits and plenty more if you do want some neodymium goodness in your life. For a few more of their more popular offerings, they've got a magnetising starter bundle with a pin vise, a supply of drill bits, magnets and some applicators. Could be a handy enough one-stop shop to get started if you're completely new to that section of the hobby. They've got all their 40k themed kits with different magnets and sometimes 3D printed components to try and make the job of customising the models a bit easier. They do have really quite a lot of those, some of them a bit more basic, quite a few things that apply to some of the more popularly magnetised things in the 40k range. They've got lots of magnet things just in general, plus those applicators that I mentioned earlier are quite a popular one for applying magnets to miniatures nicely without getting them stuck to things while doing so. There's some flush fit ones to go under bases, which could be alright for magnetic storage systems. And then they have some flight stand bundles for hovering things not snapping off those flying bases. In any case, check them out, there'll be links down in the video description, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. And check out the channel's Patreon page if you'd like to support. There's a few rewards for channel backers, such as seeing certain videos early, occasional votes to see what sort of things come next, and a few more things like entry to the regular channel giveaways. In any case though, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.